I want you to think about a time when you were put in charge of something or someone. What it felt like when you experienced having a little bit of authority, when you got a taste, right? When people have to do what you say or rely on you in a way, it's tempting to want just a little more control, a little more power, right? But having authority is tricky because we all know what it's like when authority is not used well. Now, we can list plenty of examples of bad authority figures, people who gave in to the temptation to put other people down to elevate themselves. We swear to ourselves that when we get power, when we get influence and more control, we'll never do that like them, right? Okay, so we know what we're trying not to be like when the opportunity to have more authority comes up. But how can we make sure that as we gain power and influence and opportunity, that we are being the kind of leaders that we would like to follow? How do we handle having authority in a world where putting others down is almost expected from people at the top? Well, according to Jesus, it's simple, not easy, but simple. In fact, Jesus is the best example of how to use authority. Jesus was a regular guy, born in a small town in the Middle East, and 2,000 years later, we're still talking about him. Even people who don't believe Jesus is the Son of God still can't help but notice the revolutionary things that he taught, things that shook the world and all of history. And a big part of how people talk about Jesus has to do with what he said and what he did when it came to power and people. All people. The people who liked him, the people who had him killed, people who followed him, people who betrayed him, people who believed he was the Son of God, and people thought he was crazy. Jesus, in his position of authority, used his power to do what nobody expected. He went upside down when he used his power to turn regular fishermen into disciples and leaders who did ministry. He used his power to heal people who were outcasts in society. He used his power to do miracles on days where religious leaders thought resting was more important. He used his power to value and elevate women in a society that disregarded and used them. In Matthew's account of Jesus' life, he writes down something Jesus said, and that covers everything we're talking about today. Jesus was talking with some people in authority in ancient Israel, and the group of people was called the Pharisees. Now, they were the religious leaders who held a ton of power, and they were always on a mission trying to discredit Jesus. They would try to trip him up by asking tricky questions, and then in the conversation, one of them straight up asked Jesus, "What's the most important thing for people to do when it comes to obeying God?" This is what the greatest authority, Jesus, says is the greatest thing we can do. Now Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And a second one is equally as important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all of the prophets' demands are based on those two commandments." Matthew 22:37 through 40. So Jesus is asked very directly, what's most important? And his response is very simple. Love God, love people. Whoa, right? Whoa. For 613 laws that the Pharisees followed to a T and encouraged other people to follow, there's no way it can be that simple. The problem with their 613 laws, yes, 613, the problem was that there was wiggle room. And the religious leaders were the ones with the power to determine exactly what those laws might mean. For example, the law that forbid working on the Sabbath. Someone had to determine what constituted work. Was walking work? Was cooking work? Was it work to ride a donkey? And figuring out the answers to those types of questions was literally the Pharisees' entire job. And as long as they were needed to interpret the law, then they could use those laws to tear other people down. But then here comes Jesus and he says that the power isn't in interpreting the laws at all. The power is in loving God and loving people. In other words, in an upside down kingdom, power is for lifting up people, not for tearing down. See, real authority is supposed to be based in love. And using authority the right way is about loving God, loving yourself, and loving others well. Now think about it this way. When you make sure that you get a healthy amount of sleep, or keep relationships that make you better, or you do your best to think kindly about yourself, that's loving yourself well. And when you choose to honor your parents, respect your teammates, stand up for other people, that's loving them well. And when you're living in ways that honor what God says is best, that's loving God. And we have options when it comes to using our authority, right? We can use our power in a way that harms others, or we can choose to lead with love. We can be part of an upside down kingdom that uses power to build up and not to tear down. Another way to say that is this: authority without love is poorly used power. Power used poorly never ends well for the person in the power and the people under their authority. One of the most brilliant and courageous people in all of history summed it up like this: power without love is reckless and abusive. Love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. Martin Luther King Jr. Power used for good is loving. Love done well uses power for the purpose of bringing justice and peace to our world. The good news is God gives us everything we need to use authority in the loving ways that He says are best. There's another writer of the Bible named Paul who was one of the most influential leaders in the early days of the Christian church. And he said this, 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power and of love and of self-discipline." God gives us all the power, love, and self-discipline that we need to live the way that He says is best. And what does God say is best? To love Him, love others, and love yourself. That's the way of the upside down kingdom. That doesn't mean that we'll get it right all the time, but it does mean that God gives us everything we need to get it right next time when we're given authority. In an upside down kingdom, power is for lifting up, not for tearing down. What we do with authority is important. It has the potential to be a powerful tool to help others, but it also has the potential to be a powerful tool to harm others. Power is like a hammer. On its own, a hammer, or your power, is not good or bad. It's just a hammer. But once it's in your hands, you determine how your power gets used. You can use it to destroy, to cause harm and tear people down, to pick on insecurities, to ignore the needs of others, to brag about you and your status, your popularity, your followers in a way that makes other people feel small. Or you can use it to build up, to choose love, to repair, to mend, to serve. You can use your time to serve others. You can use your influence with following to celebrate or bring awareness to issues that affect other people. You can make good grades. Great. Well, tutor somebody. Are you naturally athletic? Be a coach. Do you have extra cash? And sponsor somebody to go to prom. If you want to make sure to use your power in a healthy way, there are a couple of steps that we can all take next time we find ourselves in that position of authority. We start like this. We choose to use our authority well for others. Think about it this way. Jesus used His authority, but He didn't use it selfishly and disregard the people around Him. Instead, He chose to use His authority to show His love for those people. In fact, it was that love that took Him to the cross. With all the power in the world, He laid it down so that we don't have to miss the overwhelming message of love that God has for us. That we would see up close the best use of power when it's used to serve others. Jesus demonstrated that power through love for His followers and His most intense enemies. He used His power in a way that brought justice and peace and hope to the entire world. Now we're supposed to do the same. We're supposed to use any power we have to bring an upside down kingdom to the world around us. So use authority well for yourself. That's number 2. Use your authority to learn to lead yourself, to make wise choices on a daily basis, to have integrity, to be the same person in private that you are in public, and to prioritize your mental and physical health. When you lead yourself well, leading others comes naturally. Now we can all choose to use authority that we have to lead ourselves well, so that we can lead other people well.